Shana Tova, everyone. Just taking a few breaths. I recommend the same for you. So the other night, I was with my son, putting him to bed. He's about five and a half. And he's been having a lot of fear at night. And so I've been trying to talk to him about what this fear is about. And the other night, this incredible grief came over him. And he was weeping and saying, "I don't want to miss you when I grow up." I was like, "My love, why would you miss me? I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." And he said, "Yeah, but when I grow up, I'm going to Israel." I was like, honey, like, if that's true, we'll figure it out. It's okay. And he's still crying. And I was like, "My love, we don't actually know what we'll be, but we're going to be okay. Okay?" It sort of made him get through the night. And I was the one who was left really thinking, like, what is this child fear that my kid is dealing with? Now, one of the things that I do as rabbi is stand up here and speak and sound like I have a message and I have it together. But actually, most of my time is spent listening. I've spent all year in so many conversations with many of you. And I will tell you this, as I look out on this room, I see each of you is in a really different place than the other. There are so many different stories, questions, hurts, loves in this room right now. And the only thing that I can really say that holds all of that is in our tefillot, in our prayer, we have this beautiful message that we read at this time of year in Psalm 27, where it says, "Achat sha'alti me'et Adonai ota avakesh." This is the one thing that I ask of you, Hashem. Shivti beveit Adonai kol yamei chayai. May I sit in the house of Hashem all the days of my life. And when I look out in this room and when I feel the energy in this room, I feel love. I really do feel love. And I want to share back with you some of the conversations that I've heard over the course of the year, because I think it's helpful to actually know where we are and for me to reflect back to you the humanity that I see in each and every one of you. It is not easy to sit in conversation in a fractured world, right? It's not easy all the time to listen to one another. And the intention that I bring to every conversation I have is to really try to see you, to really, really try to understand what is the love at the root of what you're telling me. So one example, besides the one about my son who is scared, is talking with a teen who's looking around at his peers and his classmates and watching a really scary level of suffering in them. More than one of his peers choosing death over living, and really, truly, him having to question, what is this world that I'm living in? What is the future for me? I'm thinking about conversations with a young parent who has watched as her kids went through COVID and school shootings and really being in an environment where this child is being told to be afraid. And the grown-up is struggling to know how to hold that fear. How do I tell my kid not to be afraid, but also to be safe, to be wary, to be smart? Well, that's an incredibly challenging emotional place to sit. Thinking about a young person themselves in their 20s who I sat with in my office who's coming out as a queer person and saying, I'm scared that I'm going to be accepted by my parents, and I'm also scared that I'm going to be accepted by God and by religion, by faith. This person believing so much in God and wanting so badly to be loved back. I'm thinking about another person who shared with me about their fear as they watch a younger generation not feel the same incredibly powerful connection to Israel that is at the center of their Jewish identity. They look askance at the younger generation and say, what is happening to these kids? Who are they? And why don't they feel what I feel? And I'm thinking about someone who's growing old, who's feeling her body fail in ways that her mind is not failing, and who's having to adjust to new realities in her body almost every week. And in all of these stories, I hear the same thing at their root. I hear a fear of the unknown. I hear that things are uncertain, that we don't know what will be, and we are scared. And that is a part, actually, of our human condition. Now, I could tell this as a sermon for our time, for our day, that it's unique that there's fear in the world, but I actually think fear is perennial. It is evergreen, you might say. And learning how to deal with fear is not just something that we each have to do, it's also something that religion is actually built for. And so what I want to speak about today is how we can learn from our tradition, learn from our faith, learn from our religion, how to deal with all of the fear that we're carrying. In that same psalm I mentioned, Psalm 27, it opens with the line, oh, gotta find it. Nope, nowhere to be seen. Look at that. Lulei Elohei Avi, Elohei Avraham. Nope. This is hilarious. Okay, well, I think I have it in my head. So it basically says, Mimi efchad, umimi ira. It says, that's Adonai uri vishi mimi ira. Hashem, my light and my help, whom shall I fear? And Adonai ma'oz chayai mimi efchad. Adonai is the stronghold of my life. Whom shall I fear? Efchad and ira, pachad and yira are both words that we have for fear. Yes, our tradition is not afraid to recognize that fear is very much a part of the human condition, and that we even have different kinds of fear that we experience. So Malbim, a commentary on, a medieval commentary from Malbim, a rabbi, says, okay, what are these two different kinds of fear? Pachad, that is when we fear the unknown. Yira, that's when we fear something that's known. What do we take this to mean? What it really sat with for me was pachad, we can think of as the controlling fear that we have when things are, in the words of Brene Brown, uncertain too much. When things are uncertain too much, we feel pachad. Pachad controls us. It rules our actions. We operate sometimes from a place of fear. We can all recognize these moments in our lives when we feel genuinely scared of how unknown things are. And that fear sits right here in our heart. It clenches our heart. It's hard to act from that place in wisdom, in wise mind. And of course, we're human. So we're busy working, acting all the time. And yes, sometimes, oftentimes, we act out of pachad. So what is yirah? Yirah is a fear of the known, in the words of Malbim. And what I'd like us to take from that is that yirah is a fear that is born of the reality that things are enormous, life is actually completely out of our control, that random things happen, that bad things happen, that also beautiful, powerful, important things happen, and we have to surrender to that reality and find a way to continue to live and choose to live in spite of an awareness of just how awesome and yes, terrifying life is. These are, we say, the days of awe, the Yamim Noraim, Yirah. These are also days of judgment, of Din, Yom Hadin, Hine Yom Hadin. What could be more terrifying than being judged? Have you been judged in your own life, in your own family, in your own relationships? It's hurtful sometimes and often scary. And that is what we say this day is about. Now, I don't really feel, maybe I've gotten you there through sharing all of this so far, but I didn't walk into a room today that felt scared. I actually walked into a room that felt joyful and hopeful and proud. And yet, we are told today to think about fear, not pachad, yirah. We're told today to think about yirah, and I believe we're told to think about yirah today, especially because today we were in control of our day. We got up, we came to shul, or we turned on the Zoom. We've arrived, we're wearing what we intended to wear, or maybe not. More or less, things went according to plan because you're here now. It's 10:35, and I think that we're basically in the realm of where we thought we would be at this hour of day. So things have gone according to plan. And from that place of feeling safe and secure, this is the place where we visit, I think, the heart center of what it means to be human. And what is the heart center of what it means to be human than the story that we heard chanted so beautifully in the voice of our teens, but the Akedah of Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac. Now, this is a challenging story. My own relationship with it began when I was a young child. I don't know exactly how old I was, but I was sitting in shul with my parents, and the Torah reading was happening, and my father leaned over to me and said, "What kind of dad would do something like this?" And it really, really stood out to me. I actually think him asking me that question in that moment is probably largely the reason that I'm here today, still asking that question. Not just what kind of parent would do this to their child, but why is this story so central to the story we tell this time of year? When we're renewing our cycles, when we're getting on a good path, we look at possibly the scariest story that we can imagine. What is this story? I want to tell it in two ways today. First, I want to tell it the way that I think most of us are used to hearing it, and then I want to look at it from a new angle. Most of us have heard the basic outline of this story in this way. One day, Avraham heard the voice of God saying, "Avraham," and Avraham said, "Hineni." And God said, "Take your son, your only, the one you love, and bring him up to a place that I'm going to show you, and offer him as an olah." An olah is a sacrifice. And Avraham didn't respond. He just started the process of packing up their bags, packing up some wood, packing up a flintstone, and they began on their way. And when Avraham saw the place from afar, he knew what it was. And then Isaac got curious and said, "Dad, what's going on?" And Dad said, "Don't worry, it's going to be okay. We're going to go up and make an offering, and God is going to provide for the offering." Okay, they continued on. They went up the mountain, and Isaac, willingly or unwillingly, is bound and prepared as the sacrifice. And Avraham lifts his hand, and in that moment, a malach Adonai, an angel of Hashem, stays his hand and says, "Avraham, Avraham." And Avraham says, "Hineni." And the angel says, "Don't go any further, okay? I see what you're up to. Good enough. Let's stop there and not do this thing that you were about to do. I see that you have yirah." I was studying this story in a group of women called Feminist Torah Study, and we were first just reacting to it, which I imagine some of you are reacting to it. I mean, there's people of all ages in this room. There are children young enough that they could identify with Isaac. There are people older than Avraham who are like, how could he ever do this? So we are all Isaac and Abraham and Sarah, who's missing in the story. We are experiencing all of those dimensions of this story at once. And in this moment, we were sitting in class, and a brave person raised her hand and said, "I get that it's really problematic what Abraham is doing. Like, I think it's bad. But I'm also having this thought, which is, don't we all often make mistakes that really hurt our children? Haven't we actually messed up and hurt other people? Of course, what Abraham does is totally unrelatable, and yet this story is allowing me to look at the worst thing I could imagine doing, which is hurting the very people that I love the most." And all of a sudden, when we reread the story through that lens, through that brave observation, the story's tone changed. It became a story about something that I actually think we can all relate to, which is that at our root, when we love something, we don't want to hurt it. When we love something, we fear that it would be hurt. And in that way, the Akedah becomes a much broader story, not just about parent and child, but about generation to generation, having things that they hold sacred, that they love, that they grip tightly because they love. And in so doing, they sometimes quash out the very real need to grow and change that we can certainly identify with in a child, and that's much harder to identify with in a culture, in a society, in a religion, in a tradition. Now, I'm not trying to make the Akedah nice. It is still a challenging story. But what I want to hold from it is this root, that in the story of the Akedah, we confront this reality that the things we treasure, the things we love, the things we want to protect are not guaranteed to be safe. And we might feel sometimes like if we can't guarantee that they were going to be safe, it would be better that we didn't try at all. We just want to put the covers over our head and pretend that things are going to stay exactly as they are. And so this is the story that we read at this time of year, because it is an insistent reminder that we actually confront just how big, terrifying, and awesome life is. And we have to do it through going through the things we fear the most. So I want to revisit those stories I told in the beginning Because each of those individuals and everybody in this room, I believe, is brave beyond measure, is doing this work every day of showing up in spite of fear. And the lesson that I want to take from these stories is that instead of pachad, we can experience yirah. And what yirah is loving really deeply the things that we have and that we treasure. And allowing a little bit of trust in that if we love deeply and truly and fully, some things will be okay. Not everything, but at least we expressed everything that we had in that moment. At least we didn't let the fear of the unknown swallow our love. And so imagining, my sweet child who's afraid that he's going to move to Israel someday, to him I would say, it's going to be okay because we love each other and you are home to me. And I'm going to spend every day loving you and showing you that. And to the teen who's afraid for his peers, I would speak, it's love that you feel. It's your fear of losing them. It's your fear of losing yourself. And that is something that you can share and connect over instead of being swallowed by the fear. For the questions about our Jewish future, love being the Jews that we are. Feel into that place of what we treasure the most about our tradition, about our religion, about our culture, about our history. It is not only fear that we have to offer. I love being a Jew. I think there are many in this room who could connect with that sentiment and feel into that place, in spite of all of the uncertainty that we face as Jewish people. And to those who are infirm or suffering in very real ways in body or in spirit, every single day, those people will tell you, I treasure every day that I have. And that is love in the face of the unknown. Taking everything that we have not for granted, but in its fullness, in its potential, and its fragile beauty. So to all of you, I really want to end on the message of l'chaim. Choose life. That is the message of this season, that we choose to love the things we fear we'll lose, that we don't let the fear overwhelm, and that we continue to choose life. Shana Tova.